All right, good evening, guys. Let me go ahead and make some modifications here. Okay, perfect. Guys, good evening. How's everyone doing tonight? Happy Thursday to you. Hopefully you're doing well. If everything is good, yeah, good. Awesome. Good evening, guys. Good to see everybody. All right. So it is Thursday. Happy Veterans Day as well. So to anyone that's out there that has served, or if you have relatives that have served, thank you for your service. Thank you to your family, your friends for serving. And we definitely honor them today as well. So I just wanted to give a big shout out to those folks that serve. And just out of curiosity, anyone here has served by any chance? I know most of us are pretty, different generations. So if you are, you can give me a little thumbs up, or you can type it in the chat. But if you are, definitely want to acknowledge you. You never know, every now and again. But it's like once every semester in the fall that we get to kind of like celebrate it. And it always lands on the 11th month, 11th day of the year. It's kind of like the final hour, right? So the 11th month of the 11th day to represent kind of like the final hour that like we serve and prevail. So that's great. Cool. All right, James. Yeah, we'll definitely give him a shout out as well for those folks that serve. All right, guys. Well, just a couple of things tonight. We got a few things going on. This evening, I definitely want to talk to you guys about the progress on your project. So we should have enough time this evening to do some one-on-ones to check in on your designs. We could probably do a in-class share, and then I'm going to switch over and do individual like one-on-ones of your designs to see how we're going. And just out of curiosity, how many of you guys have already gotten to have at least found one piece of artwork that's going to go into your poster, and you've done some artwork processing? I'm just kind of curious for those folks. Okay, so we seem to be in there. Okay, we want to definitely be at that stage for this evening on terms of like the development of the art and where you are with that artwork. And of course, we should also have a rough idea of what the poster design is going to look like, right? It's not artwork first, it's thumbnail sketch first, which has a rough layout of what you want. And then the artwork comes after that. So you want to know where your map is. You have to have a map before you start putting graphics onto your map or your poster elements. You want to know what your poster element is, or what the overall composition and layout of the design is. And then we add the artwork to that. Does that kind of make sense? There's room for adjustment, right? But it should be like, 25%, no more than 25% of like changes. You should have at least 75 to 80% of the design like sort of mapped out in your mind. And thumbnail sketches are a great way of doing that by showing where you want to go and what design is like making sense to you and how it relates to the theme of the story. Okay. And so that's generally like the best way to do it, so that you're getting the most done in the shortest amount of time. Okay. So before we do, I wanted to take a quick moment to talk to you guys tonight about color theory. And so just kind of going over some of the basics and what we can do and how we can find that in Adobe Illustrator. I'm not sure if you guys know, but Adobe Illustrator does have color options. Color theory even gives you a range of color options that it kind of picks for you. So if you're like me, that's not the best color theorist, then technically Adobe Illustrator and really Photoshop as well can give you some ranges of colors. Yeah, and then James has like shades of color swatches that are out there. There's so many different variations of it. It's far and wide. Okay, so we'll talk about color theory this evening because it's really important to know, and we'll go over that. Okay, and then we'll do our one-on-ones and kind of break it down into that level. Okay, you would generally see this in like a logo. When it comes to logo design, you would generally find this, but for this project, and really any project, color theory is really important because it is emotion, right? Or it is literally a way of communicating feelings and emotion through color and combinations of color. Okay. So we'll go over that. We'll talk a little bit of that. But before we do, I wanted to kind of like in spirit and theme of today's holiday, Veterans Day, I'm gonna do a little something to your eyes, okay? So if you have your screen and you could see this, I would like you guys to kind of take a moment to focus your eye on the center of the flag, okay? All right, so you're gonna be staring at that dot, okay? There's like a white dot at the center of your screen, okay? And you're gonna like stare at that dot and you're gonna try not to blink as much. And we're just gonna stare at that for about 30 seconds or so to a minute, okay? So stare at the dot, look at that dot, okay? Try not to blink as best as you can. Play along too with that. Okay. Try not to blink. Give you guys about another 15 seconds. Okay. All right. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2. Did you notice that? Okay, what did you guys notice? Anyone want to take a wild guess? Okay, let's see. You can type it in or you can voice it in, but what did you guys see for like literally a split second? Yeah, so exactly, and the inverse color. You saw the American flag in the actual colors, which is the red, white, and the blue, excuse me. So what happened, right? I don't know if you've ever done that exercise before, but what we basically did was that you saw the opposite or complement color in brain games. Yeah, you've seen that before in brain games, yeah. If you've never seen that before, basically what we did is that we basically overstimulated the conical receptors of your eyes, right? And we overstimulated it so much that the moment we took it away, your eye compensated and showed the complement or the opposite of that color. So, right, the opposite of that blue is red, the opposite of black is white, and then the opposite of sort of like that orange yellowish tone is blue. So this is a great way that I like to do to engage orange opposite of orange is blue. And so I always engage students that way. And that basically kind of taps into like what we see, which is kind of like the frequency of light. Our eyes can only see so many different frequencies of light that comes of white light. And basically we have so many different receptors in our eyes that pick up those lights that essentially color is just the light bouncing off a surface or material at that frequency. So color is really like a frequency of light going into your eye and basically showing a color related to that. Does that kind of make sense? Just kind of briefly going into the science of it. So whenever we see something that has a color to it, that's literally what's happening. Black, any color, it's basically whatever frequency is showing in that. Your eyes are picking it up, right? And so screens do a really good job of that. Our cell phones do a really good job of that. It's basically transmitting light at a certain frequency, which is the color in and of itself, right? So there's a little bit of that going on, which is pretty awesome. And in psychology, when you look at, and there's even, psychological references to that, right? And we'll talk about color psychology in a second. But basically, because color works in so many different frequencies, and is working with light, light has different brightnesses and different ranges as well. And so when you ask the question, how many colors are there in the world? The official answer to that is basically a really big number. If there's about 1,000 levels of light and dark, with every red to green range, with every yellow and blue, there's about 100 levels of those colors being mixed. You can basically roughly calculate, right, that there's about 1,000 times 100 times 100 times 100, 10 million, Computer displays about 16.8 million colors to create full color pictures. So really, that's what's viewable according to your eye, right? But it says right here that if we have 10 million colors times 10 million lighting types times 10 million lighting levels times 10 million surrounding colors times 6 billion people in the world times 3 modes of viewing, we get a really, really big number, which is basically 18 followed by 33 zeros, or 18 decillion. Technically, we can view at least 10 million colors in a single viewing condition according to the number. So if you really have to like look at all the guesstimations and the numbers, if you take every person on the planet and give them a color, then technically you need 24 planet Earths, or 24 times the population of people to give you a potential range of colors, to just give you an estimate of what's possible, right? That's billions of different color options according to different billions of colors of light. Like, so our eyes can only see so much, but with all the light levels and all the ranges, it's crazy. And people go, oh, wow, that's pretty insane, right? That's pretty like nuts when you look at like the theoretical behind that, right? So that's a lot of color, and even studies even show us that certain animals can see certain ranges of colors more so than humans, right? And I totally believe that, right? Like it just depends on the sensitivity of the species, their eye, how sensitive they are to light. And humans can only see so many colors in the millions, but we have billions of options available to us, but we can only see millions of different colors. That's insane when you think about that, right? The range of color and what's possible, and how humans are also limited as well by their biology. So it always fascinates me when I think about that, because it just shows me that we don't really know everything and we haven't seen everything. So there's still room to learn, and there's still room to see new colors. So I hope somebody figures out a way to see new colors according to those ranges. That would be pretty rad if one day we figure out ways for humans to see more colors and increase the sensitivity of the eye in and of itself, right? That would be pretty awesome. So just kind of breaking this down, okay? I'm not sure if you guys have had like some basic color theory, and maybe I can just survey the class really quick just by a show of thumbs or thumbs up emojis. How many of you guys have heard some type of color theory talk, whether in high school or in college? Okay, so almost a little under half the class. Okay, no worries. When it comes to color, it's a really fascinating thing because in elementary we're taught color, but we're not really taught like everything about color when you're in elementary school, if that makes sense, right? Like you're taught that it's important, but you don't really know like the whole like the science behind it, right? Or really just like the psychology behind it, right? So, we'll start with like some basic color theory, right? Now, again, there's billions of colors, right? So as humans, we have to figure out a super easy way to kind of like make sense out of the color world. We use something called a color wheel to make sense out of the colors in the world. And this is how it kind of works, right? In terms of like the color wheel. Essentially, there's something called primary colors, prime first, metal first, right? Primary colors. And basically primary colors are the first colors that you cannot mix to create. So red, yellow, blue, I can't mix anything to make red. I can't mix anything to make blue or yellow. These are like your purest form of color, right? Primary colors. So that's the first part. So red, yellow, and blue are the first ones, right? But so our wheel starts off there. Think of it as slices on a pizza, or like a pizza slice, right? So when you think about the secondary colors, right? Secondary colors are pretty much the colors that come after mixing the primary color, right? So if I take two primary colors, okay, more specifically, let's look at orange. If I take a red primary and a yellow primary color, mix those two, I get a secondary orange, right? Because yellow and red mix together to create a color orange. If I do yellow and blue, used to be like an old Ziploc commercial back in the days, like yellow and blue make green, it's easy. And then they show you like that color means that your Ziploc bag is closed. That's how I even like, that's how I remembered like color theory for some reason. Like that commercial taught me about color mixing, was like, oh, the Ziploc bag color mixing. So yeah, yellow and blue, when you mix those together, it creates green, and that's a secondary color, which is green, okay? Red mixed with blue creates a secondary color. So red primary, violet primary, or excuse me, red primary, blue primary, mixes together to create a secondary color of violet. And so you start to see the wheel begin to increase, right? So we're filling that in. That's how they kind of interrelate. Okay, so now we talk about tertiary, right? When I think of tertiary, I think of tertiary, additional, tres, for some reason. Tertiary is kind of like what I think about. And tertiary colors are basically what you just thought. A primary plus a secondary makes a tertiary. So we go even deeper, right? So if you take a red primary plus a secondary violet, you get your red violet, right? If you take your red primary plus your secondary orange, you get a tertiary red orange, and further around the wheel, right? So you take your orange, your yellow primary plus secondary orange, yellow orange, right? Blue green, blue violet. People would call this basically your cyan. People would call this your pastel colors. Now we're starting to get wider into the color wheel, okay? Does that kind of make sense essentially, right? So this is a good refresher, but that's our wheel, right? And so our color wheel is all about identifying how they interrelate with each other, okay? So this is super simple, super basic, right? Obviously, you throw in different levels of light and different shades of these individual colors because of that light, man, it turns into the billions, right? But that's how it works at the end of the day, okay? Now, color is contrast, okay? So when we talk about contrast, remember back in our principles of design, we talked about like contrast of size, big or small, contrast of shape, organic, geometric, and I also mentioned contrast of colors, right? Different colors. Contrasting colors have its own little science and method on how to contrast, right? Some people do it naturally and are really good at it. Others need a little bit more like structure and a little bit more focus on it, and that's a little bit who I am, right? I totally respect and admire designers that know how to mix their colors naturally and just naturally can contrast and mix colors really, really, really well, right? And so they're fascinating to me, those people, right? I need help. Like I need to basically like see how it does. So for me, I always have to kind of revert back to the wheel a little bit, because I always have to ask myself, okay, when I'm mixing colors, I need to understand that complements are opposites, right? So when something is a complement, it's kind of like opposites attract, right? That we complement each other. But really complementary colors means that they're across the wheel and they create the greatest contrast, right? So red and green creates a pretty strong contrast, right? And you'll get a lot of eyes on your design when you're contrasting your colors. So like when I'm designing, if I'm selecting a color, whatever the color may be, right? I'm always thinking like, okay, if I want contrast, I'm thinking about complementary colors to create the greatest level of contrast, right? So there is a method to it, okay? Complementary colors are referring to across the wheel, or colors that are sort of across your wheel, essentially. And even though they're opposites, you know, colors across the color wheel, there's a lot of different variations, and I'm using the same slide for that. Here we go. So when it comes to these, with this image, right, we see it in nature too, right? Like colors that are kind of contrasting look really interesting. They look really appealing. So sometimes just knowing what colors contrast can make you a better photographer. And I know there's a couple of you guys out there that, you know, are really focused on photography, and, you know, being able to identify and just know some of the basic color theory principles, like complementary colors, primary, secondary colors, like how they all mix and match, can be really helpful when you see a photo that looks really good, right? Like, oh, hey, those are complementary colors. I'm going to pull that, right? So just knowing the colors in and of themselves can create some really awesome photographs, like you see here in this image, okay? Now, cool colors, as they're kind of termed, are just basically colors next to each other on the wheel. Those are your violets, your blues, the colors that you normally see in nature or in water, if that makes sense. And so everything on half of that wheel, like from violet to yellowish green, and everything in between those colors are basically like your cool colors, right? To me, they kind of remind me of water, of the earth, of outdoors, of like calming spaces, if that makes sense. So things that are very calming. So anytime I want to create sort of a calming effect, I'm always thinking about just those color options, right? So if you ever want to create, like, let's say in your poster design, a calming effect, these would be the colors that you would select, like cool colors, right? Going back to the contrasting colors, if you want to create a loud, in your face, sort of intense color option, then contrasting colors would be really helpful for that too, right? But cool colors are really, really found in nature, and they remind me of just like calm spaces, if that makes sense, right? Now, the opposite is true too. Warm colors, hot colors, bright colors. Hots are typically what I hear are warm colors. These are everything that are opposite to that, right? They kind of for me, they remind me of like fire, outdoors, fall activity. These are sort of the terms that I think about when I think about like, warm colors, right? Red, violet, all the way to yellow. And when we look at artists like, Van Gogh that selects colors, he's selecting warm colors, right? To communicate a message and emotion, right? One of the coolest things I remember from the immersive Van Gogh exhibit was that, he, for being sort of like this, post-impressionist or expressionist, you can make the argument, you could feel what made him so special was that even though he was painting in a style that was not literal, it was like brush strokes that kind of were like a version or impression, right, of reality, right? What made him so interesting and special and really prolific was that the brush strokes and the colors and the way he like depicted people, you could sense the emotion. You could almost feel it just by looking at it, right? And what's kind of crazy about the Van Gogh world, and as designers, one of the craziest things or the shocks of my life when I saw a Van Gogh for the first time at the Getty was like, oh my God, like the colors I saw in my textbooks do it no justice compared to the real thing. Does that make sense? Like those colors, like you have to see a Van Gogh in person, because the colors in person, wow, like they really, really communicate the message, right? And anyone that's ever printed anything, right, exactly, James, right, knows that it's really hard to match colors when you're putting ink onto paper, right? It's hard to match a color. And it's because you have paper, you have ink, and then you need a certain amount of it, and the paper can only absorb so much. So just like your eyes have limitations to frequencies of colors, so does paper. Does that make sense? And so paper has its own limitations, and when you see a photograph of something that was painted on a canvas, the color that oil painting captures on a canvas material is so much more different than an ink on a paper. Like the colors are more vibrant. They actually are brighter, right? So when you see a Van Gogh, you go, whoa, okay, now I get it. My textbook was completely off on the color. And think about it, like no one is going to go through millions of textbooks and say, did anyone make sure that the Van Gogh colors match? Like, no, they're not doing that, right? So I almost feel robbed, because I was like, oh wow, like I really have to go see it in person. Then it just clicks, then it makes sense. So even though we see this picture of a Van Gogh and a painting, this digital photograph is nothing compared to the real thing. The real thing is amazing. Like the colors just are like, wow, like you can sense the emotion from the color selections, right? Bright, warm, lively. And then when you look at the brush strokes, they're very like some of them are aggressive and they look like really intense. And that's another way of communicating emotion, is through the feeling of the brushstroke. So it's the brushstroke and the colors that do it justice. And so Van Gogh is probably one of the best examples of what color can do for emotion. And I know I went off on a rant there, but go see the immersive exhibit. It's great. I would go to the second floor and see it in HD, because I feel like the HD screen has a little bit more of a closer color match than the downstairs area, because it's a low resolution image, right? So high def, the colors are bright, but don't be fooled. The high def colors are a little bit closer to the real thing. And James, maybe you can Google it when the show ends. It could be December or end of November, December-ish, but definitely worth checking out nonetheless, to set that up. And you can type it in the chat or you can voice it in. We'll see how that goes. So we'll get that information for you there, Alexa, when we know where that ends. So really, really cool stuff there in terms of the color combinations, okay? Analogous colors, basically analogous colors are those 3 to 7 colors next to each other on the wheel, that kind of have one color in common, if that makes sense, right? So analogous colors basically are kind of rooted in red and orange, and they all kind of relate, but they all kind of connect to like one color. So if you're wondering like, oh, where these terms are coming from, you'll see what I mean in a minute, why I'm mentioning those terms, because they connect to your Adobe Illustrator color panel. So those terms do show up in the program. Okay, so that's why I'm throwing out the contrast, analogous, cooler colors, complementary colors. Okay, just to give you guys a little forewarning there. So 3 to 7 colors next to each other on the wheel are known as analogous colors, and it's all about harmony. Yes, you thought about it, right? If you want your design to match up, we talked about it a little bit in our t-shirt project, was when you match the artwork, like the lines and the shapes, right? You echo the art style. But also color helps us bring harmony into the design. And just the same way, it can add variety too, right? On where you patch it up. So color is all about the majority. Like I see more of a certain set of colors, it brings it together, right? If I see one little contrasting color off to the corner, that could be variety. But it's all about like the amount of how much you see on your design. Does that make sense? So when you want to create harmony with color, it's like a lot of that same set of colors, a lot of it. And when you want to add some variety, there's like a color that's very like not within the family, that's different, contrast, opposite, that's like added one time or two, and that's like a small hit and it's different from the majority. So that's kind of like how you can create harmony or variety with color. Does that make sense a little bit? So when you're doing your poster designs, you're kind of thinking about like, oh, how can I use color in a way that brings it together, but communicates emotionally as well, okay? So just throwing that out there. If that makes sense, you can give me like a little thumbs up emoji. So that just making sure that that's thrown out there, okay? So again, analogous colors, that's like your 3 to 7 colors next to each other, right? It could be a orange, yellow, orange with a yellow. There's so many different ranges of colors that you can select. It just throws everybody into a spin, right? So the options are virtually endless when it comes to your selection of colors, okay? And so here's another way of visualizing it, okay? Harmonious colors, harmony. These are colors that are basically kind of like analogous or next to each other in the color wheel. So if you ever want to create harmony in your design, these might be some color options you might want to consider, okay? These are colors that are next to each other on the color wheel that can communicate a certain message, a certain feeling, right? Cooler colors, calming. Warmer colors, a little bit more vibrant, a little bit more active, a little bit more alive or lively, okay? So that's helpful, you know? And so you have green and orange happening in there. That's a little bit of contrast, right? That's okay. Those are contrasting colors and you're trying to say, look at me, look at me. There's a loud statement happening here, right? And that's okay too, because graphic design is all about creating contrast or focal point, right? That's the world we live in. So you have options, but at the end of the day, contrast or focal points are created by contrasting colors, shapes, or sizes. Colors, shapes, or sizes. That's it. okay? And each little principle has its own set of rules, so to speak, okay? And of course, the list goes on and on. If you have a complement and you split one side down the middle, it's called a split complement. So the range of colors are endless, right? Oh, I like these two opposite colors, but I'm going to take one and just kind of split out one slice on the left and to the right. That's a split complement. Again, it's complementary, but in 3 colors, not just 2. Does that make sense? So if you're like, I want to create complementary, high contrasting, but I need 3 colors, then that's a split complement, right? And so split complements can make some really cool combinations, and it can increase when you add different brightnesses on top of that, right? So like going back to it, different lightings, different values adds more options. So you can literally take a class on color theory and explore this stuff endlessly, right? And I think and if you are interested in exploring color, the best way to do it is by using acrylic colors, acrylic paints. Buy a bunch of acrylic paints and literally take a paper plate for 99 cents at the 99-cent store and start mixing colors. When I spoke to one of my guest teachers, that was a friend of my professor in college, he was mixing color, and that's what he did. I was like, we're doing a color workshop, and this is it. He's like, yeah, all you have to do is mix colors. It's all about exploring, because he knew what I didn't know at the time, which was different brightnesses, different light levels create endless arrangements of colors. So scientifically, logically, that's what he was thinking, but he couldn't articulate or didn't explain the possibilities. Does that make sense? So that's why it just blew your head right now, blew your minds, and said, like, there's billions of color options that are out there, and we will never see all of them, and we will never get to possibly experience all those colors unless our eyes evolve to higher levels of sensitivity biologically. Does that make sense? So, and who knows, maybe there's people out there that actually have more higher levels of sensitivity, because how do you describe a new color when no one's ever seen it before? So there might just be people out there that just, I don't know, maybe just evolved people that can see colors and they just think it's normal, and we don't realize that they see color, right? So you never know. If you see a color and you realize no one else sees it, like, you don't see that, you just might be a mutant. I don't know. And you're an X-Men, and you are the X-Men designer, and you can do things that no other human can do and be a famous designer as a result. So, but I digress. These are some elements about color theory that we just want to keep in mind. And there is some color theory sheets and references that are out there. But let me just show you in Adobe Illustrator where you can find these color options and color theory, okay? Because the computer does it for you. And here's another great resource and tool that you can add to your repertoire of techniques. So if I go to Adobe Illustrator, and I just we'll just go back to like our original design over here. And let me just close that a little bit. Okay, then essentially what you got here is our properties panels. Open up properties, okay. And when you go to your window menu, I'm gonna basically try to go to desktop 1 to kind of increase that. But if we go to window color guide, okay, and this is your color guide and color panel, okay. Now we're pretty much familiar with our color panel, right? And we know that we can select colors by double clicking onto the color panel and selecting those colors according to the list there. Now the color guide is exactly the thing that we just learned right now. It is basically your guide to color. So if I have, like, let's say black here on my screen and I select it, then you'll notice, and let me see if I can kind of increase the scale a little bit here and place it a little bit towards the center. There we go. Then basically what happens is that you'll notice on your interface Oh, wonderful. I always want to use that, but we'll see. Basically, what you'll notice is that if you select a color, let's say it's black, then Adobe Illustrator will say, hey, here's some shades of color that match to it. But if you notice on the right of these multiple blocks of these harmony rules, you'll see harmony rules. And harmony rules is literally, look at that. They're the color combinations we just talked about. So if we notice complementary, complementary to, split complement, left complement, right complement, analogous, monochromatic or shades of the same color, triads, which are 3 color combinations, or high contrast, they're all given for you, right? They're automatically given to you, and you can select those colors accordingly. So if I have black and I'm like, man, I need to get a high contrast happening in my design, what colors can I pick for black? Well, then go to high contrast 1, and you'll notice that you have a series of colors that you can contrast with black, right? So, you know, if I want to create a background for my poster, for my, you know, black lowrider, and let's just say, you know, for my lowrider graphic, that's what I want, I can select or draw my rectangular background, click onto that sort of pinkish tone, and I can select something like this, or brown, or green, and these would be contrasting colors to black that are high contrast, harmonious, visually interesting, right? And depending on the story or the context that you want, you can even select different shades of those colors as well, or tints, if you feel like they're too intense, too dark, or too bright. So Adobe Illustrator literally comes in firing all these options to you so that you can build your color combination. So this is a really cool and really great tool. And when you're working with minimalism, you know, you need everything at your disposal, like the main graphics and the icons, and color theory as well, not to mention fonts, because even fonts communicate. So fonts, colors, and certain images are all part of creating a successful graphic or image. And so these are some really great ways to kind of do that in your design if you're trying to go for something a little bit on the more intense end, or if you're planning ahead and you know that you need to have certain colors for certain effects, then plan for that. And you can use high contrast option 2, 3, or 4 within your color theory and color option piece. Okay, so really great tool, really awesome way to add emotion to your design, and that's going to be really, really helpful. Okay, now the last thing I'll say is that when it comes to, and hopefully I have that doc here, but yes, I have it here. When it comes to color, the last thing I'll say is that there is a psychology behind it, okay? And so normally I show this for logos, but I'll just kind of lightly touch off on it. But when it comes to color, there's actually some psychology that's built into it, okay? And so there is some meaning behind it. And I want to just kind of quickly show you like what those color combinations would look like, okay? So let me go ahead and see if I can flip that really quick and show you, okay? And colors tell stories, right? So if we're trying to interpret a story in our project, think about how colors can tell the story that you just saw, okay? So movies have color palettes, right? You ever notice that? And so there's a lot of really interesting examples, okay? If you recall The Matrix, okay? One of my favorite films. And this is a big one too, because I think it comes out in a few weeks. Like next month is the new installation of The Matrix, right? One big theme, and maybe we'll have some time to connect and maybe see it and review it, is that there are tints of green, right? So if you guys, no surprise, the green represents the Matrix. But at the time, if you ever remember watching that movie when you were a kid, no one told you that, right? It was always like in the background, and the real world was shades of blue, okay? If you look at some of the trailers, The colors in the new film are actually reds and blues. And if you know the story of the Matrix, you know that you took the red pill or you took the blue pill, and each pill was reality, or you go further into the rabbit hole. So I think it was the blue pill, if I recall, that Neo took. If you notice in the film, or some of the trailers, we see lots of reds and blues and bright colors. So we have a story being told in that, right? We don't know what the story is, but we do know that the red and blue is still a really powerful color happening within that, right? Wizard of Oz, really obvious, right? Black and white, right? Dorothy was in, reality, and then the world of Oz, it was in color. Okay, no surprise there. Okay, so really great examples. And so if you look at those color ways, those colors represent something. Those greens are natural, right? Home-like, versus browns, which are muddy, dark, damp, just no emotion and no feeling. But green is like home, right? The farm. So these are symbolic representations of that, okay? The Sixth Sense, this is a great film. On it there, if you never watch it, and it'll freak you out at the end. But yeah, real world, natural colors, whenever there was like contamination or, these ghosts would show themselves, then there was these certain tones of reds, browns, right? So there's intent, right? Everyone loves Avatar, okay? You have your blues in the real world, and then you have your teals and your brights in Pandora. So there were clear indicators of reality. So color's a great way of telling, making the viewer know where they are in relation to the story. And so ask yourself that, like, what are some ways that we can communicate colors so that we can influence the mind of the viewer's thinking as they're seeing that, okay? So think about that, right? Wisdom, okay? The color white would probably be referred to as wisdom for Native Americans, right? Whereas in America, white would be like purity or like just like purity in a sense, right? But in Native American culture, that represents like wisdom, okay? Purple in Japan is wisdom. Blue in Eastern Europe represents wisdom. So context of nation is there. So keep in mind that as you're designing, we are designing for the Western world, but if you ever go to certain nations or certain continents, be super aware that color will always have a different meaning in a different culture, okay? So if we hit love, then red is love in Europe and in Western America, but yellow for Native Americans is love, right? Or green in India represents love. So interesting, right? Like every culture is going to have different storylines. So whatever is the culture that you're representing or communicating, color would be a great way to reference that, okay? If I'm mourning, it's black. Someone died, black in America. But if it's in China, it's white. So if I go to some type of funeral or service, I'm wearing white to mourn the death of someone, right? Or purple in South America. So everything has its own meaning and in color and interpretation, okay? And I have so many decks on different color theories and things of that sort, but that's kind of the color there, okay? Peace, and of course, in America is blue. So if you want to create a calming color, a calming presence, that's going to be blue for your color option, okay? And I should get like a bigger deck in terms of the color meanings and the theories here. So I'll get that out to you guys because I know there's like better ways to like communicate that. But at the end of the day, color is going to have a different emotion and a different impact and a different meaning to it, okay? Does that kind of make sense, guys? In terms of its like representation. So keep that in mind. Color is also psychological. Okay, so we're at 7:30. Here's the game plan, okay? As we're developing our graphics, okay, think about color in ways that communicate story, okay? So as you're selecting images, tracing your images, drawing your images, and developing those elements, we're gonna think about color as well as a way to communicate using our color guide. So you can use your color guide in Adobe Illustrator, to help you kind of build a little bit of the color options and the color theories to kind of help you get that going, okay? While you guys are working, I'm going to be meeting with everyone individually to check in on the project, okay? So if you want to, I think we're a little bit early in the game, but if you wanted to, you could technically share your document in the cloud with me. If you remember how to do that, you can, and I'll pull that up. If not, then we'll take a look at it by you sharing your screen, and that could be just fine as well, okay? So I'll meet with everyone on a one-on-one basis, and we're basically going to work independently on the poster so we can get that going. My goal is to have it done, hopefully, if not by end of this class session, but midway through next Tuesday, so that we can get started also with the logo design, because we're moving faster on these last two projects so that we have enough time for the final, because finals kick off in the beginning of December. So this project and the logo project are going to move extremely, extremely fast. Okay. So just throwing that out there just to let you guys know. You have everything you need because you did very well with the Mickey project. This is basically like similar to the Mickey t-shirt project. You're just using less graphics. Okay. And you're trying to tell a story of your choosing rather than one that is given to you like Mickey Mouse and Happiest Place on Earth theme. Now you're thinking deeper about it and taking a story that you know, and you're turning that story that you know into colors, shapes, and specific layouts and focal points. Okay, that's the idea. Oh, you're creating your own images, Kaiser. So there are no images given to you. You have to be resourceful and draw or live trace your own. Okay, so I'm throwing you on the deep end of the pool, and I'm basically letting you guys find your images so you can build it up using image trace. We talked about that on Tuesday. You can even go Vecteezy route if you want to download certain elements, or you know how to pen tool, so you can trace it and use your pen tool to create it. So now you are the designer, and now you will be creating your artwork. So that means you have to really time yourself on that too. Okay. All right. Cool. No worries. So that's the idea. Sound good? All right, cool. Let's go ahead and get this party started. I'm going to create the one-on-one breakout rooms. I'm going to pull you guys in, so don't be surprised. If you like want to get on top of the list or there, then you can kind of do that. And movie poster font isn't working. You don't have to worry about the movie poster font if it's not downloading. What you could do is use the raw text that is given to you. The template is outlined. So that text that's in that template is all you really need for the movie poster text there. So it's outlined, and the way you know it's outlined, let's take a look. Okay, so moving this off to the side. So these texts here, they're basically outlined for you. So you don't, the movie poster font is really designed for the movie poster text or the titles. I would totally recommend downloading a new font for the movie type, since the font for the text is going to be very different from the movie poster title anyway. They're not the same. So I would definitely recommend like downloading a font. A couple of good ones is DaFont. I think I may have mentioned that before. DaFont.com is a really great site. Font Squirrel is another really great site, but I would concentrate on the main graphics first and get the layout as good as you possibly can, and then we'll get the font after that. But really the font is not going to be the same as the one that's been given to you at the end of the day, because that's the title text. But it's already been outlined, so you can use that and you can work with that and add your own font to it. Okay. Okay, and if it's random things, that probably refers to just certain texts that font only has. Not every font has the same alphabet. Some are just letters with no numbers. Some have only numbers and letters but no symbols. So certain fonts have certain characters built into it. It just depends on the font of choice there. Okay. All right, cool. All right, we're gonna get this breakout room started, and one-on-one. I have that with professional. Boom. And okay. So I'm gonna jump in there, guys. And basically I'm gonna be pulling everybody in. If there's nothing going on the design, try to take a picture of the thumbnail sketch and send it over to me. That way we do see that, okay? And that way we can get you going. And I'm seeing a couple of messages already. Okay, great. Yeah, so there's already a few requests for pulling into the breakout rooms. Okay, so I'll start pulling in a couple of folks that are already requesting it. But let's start developing the poster, designing, and if there's any messages or any issues or concerns or questions, you could always message me directly, and then I'll get you set up there. Okay. All right, guys. Let's jump into it, and I will start pulling in some folks in the breakout room. So I'll see you guys in just a few minutes. All right, guys. So a couple of things. Thanks for your patience. I already met with a couple of folks this evening on the poster. So Nydia, James, and Kaiser, we still got a couple of things to take a look at on your design. So we'll try to push through for this evening so we can take a look at it. Let's see. Nydia, did you want to share your design? Are you okay with sharing what you have so far with the class, or would you prefer like the breakout room? Just wanted to see.
Yeah, I can share.
Okay, let's take a peek and see how your design's coming out.
Let me. Can you guys see that?
It's about to show us in a few seconds. Okay,
Oh,
so we see it there. Okay,
so this is like a drawing that I made, and this is based off of the 97% one. And I was gonna use the guy as like a template so I can like make a silhouette of his face. And it's supposed to show like the broken heart of the 97% because it was like the missed opportunity and like it was caused by his phone.
okay. So to you, the theme of the film is, or what does this film tell you about life in general? Like, what would you say that is about
And
missed opportunity?
he was too busy looking for something when it was right in front of him.
Okay.
Basically, like he missed out on it.
Okay, so missed opportunity, too busy looking for something, and kind of missed out. So you have like the broken heart, to represent that it was an incomplete almost, right?
Mm-hmm.
And in the center of that, was it the phone's fault? Is that what you're saying at the end of the day?
Or like I guess like him just like he was so trapped in his phone, basically trying to look for that love.
Okay. So then this concept of like trapped, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like trapped phone, that's kind of the idea, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
how do we
Because
show, well, one more
at
time?
the end of the film, he was still looking for his love, like even after
Yeah, so he was
he
kind of locked
realizes.
in.
Mm-hmm.
And even at the end of the film, there was like a 98% chance he found his love match, which was like better than the last one, which is kind of funny
Mm-hmm.
too.
Yeah.
So in your concept, you're thinking about 97% not matched, right? So like the kind of like the broken heart concept,
Mm-hmm.
right? But at the center of it, whatever's in the middle is the thing that broke the connection, which if I'm reading it correct is the mobile phone or the mobile device.
Yeah.
Okay. So if that's the case, then we have you wanted to add the figure or the person in the center of that, you said?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. We have like three different levels, right? So we have the heart, we have the phone, and then we have the person in the center of that. Totally have no problem seeing the three levels to it. I think for me, it's going to be a question of like, oh, I wonder if it's almost kind of like when we see the person in the center, does it relate back to the phone? At the end of the day, I kind of wonder if it's like, oh, I wonder if it's going to be a picture. Are people going to think it's a picture? Um, is it more?
Mm-hmm.
Does it make more sense just to have like the phone and like
Oh yeah.
something
Yeah.
related to love, or
Mm-hmm.
recreate the app itself?
Yeah, maybe yeah, recreate the app.
You know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean? And because
Yeah.
then I'll know that like it's about the app and the missed love opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
And then those two levels of information will be enough to kind of tell both parts of the story almost. Does that kind of make sense a
Oh,
little
okay.
bit?
Yeah, yeah.
So
Okay, thank
so
you.
so that'll keep some simplicity to it. So I think that's at the heart of it. Okay. Um, when you create it, you can create it a couple of ways. Like obviously you can live trace it out, flatten
Mm-hmm.
it, put a font over that. But I understand where your concept is going. I think when it's ready, I'm curious to know if there's going to be like a colored background or not, with like a red heart over that, and then the phone in between the
Mm-hmm.
two, maybe slightly tilted. Um, just a couple of things to keep in mind as you're developing it. Okay.
Mm-hmm. Oh,
Um,
okay. Thank you.
so conceptually, it's working pretty good. I like it. I just between now and next week, let's really push to build the artwork as close to final as we can. Okay.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Cool. All right. Looking good. It's moving in the right direction. Okay, and then Kaiser, how about you? If you want to share your design, how's that design coming along?
Yep, just let me share the screen.
Great. Okay, and then while we're doing that, let's see. Okay, so for your design there, Kaiser, remember there's a template inside of Canvas that's available for the design to go. Do you remember that one? Or I showed you guys. So so that's going to be in Canvas, and it'll have the type and the movies and everything like that. So the movie poster type. But let's look at the design. And you were going with a
with 97%.
Okay, so we have the train. It looks like the bench of the station, right?
If you want to give me 1 second, I can try and get rid of the
guides.
Yeah.
If you go to view and then scroll down to guides, you can actually shut off the guides there.
Is it smart bits?
Hide smart. Actually, where are you? View guides, hide, show.
There.
Are those rulers? Oh my goodness, I'm already for Command R. Rulers, I think it could be rulers. Are those rulers or are those guides? No, the rulers would be visible.
I hit Control R for them.
What about Command semicolon? Oh, there you go. Oh, okay, perfect. Okay, so a couple of things. Are you building it out in black and white first, and then later going to add color to it? Is that what
yes? I'm just trying to get a sense of like scale and background and foreground.
Perfect. Okay, so I would say the first thing is 97% should be like a focal point. So okay. I like the signage. I like where you're going with it. I think for me, it's going to be like that title is going to be really, really large, right? And okay. That sign, is that a sign or is that the app at play? Is that
it's supposed to be? It's supposed to be like one of those. What's it called? Like those, like the signs to tell you when your train is coming in, like the name of the train and what time it's supposed to be showing up.
Okay. Now, in the film, does the sign ever tell the person like where the person is? Like, is the information on a sign, or is it mostly on the cell phone, that information about like where your love is?
It's on the phone.
Yeah, and so I would say because it's on the phone, it's the, like if we say less than 25 meters away, it almost feels like it should be a phone as opposed to a sign, if that makes sense. Just because we're trying to relate it back to the film, right? And we're trying to tell the story of the film or the meaning of the film with pictures. So the train shows that we have trains, and the bench shows that we're waiting for something, right? The sign, normally that information about love and where it is typically like in the phone itself, right? So, a quick fix for that would be like, would we just have 97% really big on the screen or on the poster, and then do we show that love is close by instead of writing it out in text? Would it be like a male and a female looking for each other, but they're not facing each other? Does that make sense?
Okay.
Like yeah. One person, like there's so many different ways to say that in reference to the film, right? So, is it two people walking the opposite direction? That technically kind of happened, right? Or it's a man looking for a woman and she's sitting in the window, and we see like a window of a woman sitting in the train, right? There's that option. So it comes down to like, how do we say what happens in the story in a simplified format? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So there's a little bit of that going on. And of course, still trying to promote the movie, which is like 97%, right? Like in a large typeface. So we have that. The other thing, what I'll say is that as you're building your file, do you have like a source of inspiration? Is there something that's kind of guiding you visually? Is there something that is like, oh, I really kind of like this graphic or this feel? For example, if I'm using, if we're looking at like minimalist posters, there's some really great, I gave you the in the assignment page of Canvas, like the inspiration poster image, and is it something that looks a little bit more like distance here, right?
I have a
Um,
subway, like subways and the signs images on Google pulled up. They're just not on. Yeah.
Oh, okay. So there could be that could be a format there, right? If it's like, because I know for why is it not pulling up? Because for minimalist, we have so many different variations, right? Like, but on the inspiration link, we have some inspiration of it that you can pull from too, where it's like, oh, if we want to show an image, are we showing things a little bit more abstract and flat? And if that's the case, is it something kind of like Chef, where it's like, more of an abstract icon of like a vehicle with like a background element happening in there,
Okay.
and with like colors as your solid background. There could be a little bit of that happening in the design, right? So it's almost kind of like, oh, like how much of a detail do you want from it? How much of a, what is the range of detail that we want the design to kind of take in it? So so yours kind of reminds me a little bit of that, where it's kind of like two images combined to represent like food and truck, right? So that's kind of like a iconic way of showing the story, as it were. So a little inspiration goes a long way, like what is the range of detail? Is it icon flat? Is it a little bit more 3D, three-dimensional, or is it something a little bit more in between that, right? Because there's so many ranges of detail that it's like it's really interesting to kind of get a little bit caught up, right? Oh, let me pull back here. So there's some options there. I'm trying to think what else is available out there. The Snowpiercer looks like it's like a bullet train, if I recall.
Yeah.
And so, in this image, we see what looks like a little bit of an outline of a graphic, right? And we see, like a fraction of a train, but it's flat, and what looks like a bit of an abstract background happening, right? So the shapes are kind of formulating. We see a train. We see this, an interesting dynamic background. And then there's a very clear type of the movie name, right? So we have that happening too. So that could be an option. That could be a possibility as well, right?
You said Snowpiercer, right?
Snowpiercer, yeah.
Okay.
So and so there's that, right? So there's an interesting range of opportunities here. When it comes to the train in 97%, I think that train was a little bit more of a curved train as well. And I think you're getting there. And I think that's what you were doing. But, is there a way for us to kind of zoom in on some of the scenes of the train, or get like really investigative and see, what type of trains these are, what they look like? You can almost kind of see that they're kind of geometric on the front there. You can almost make it out, right? And that could be an option too. So, it doesn't have to be an exact bullet train, but it could be something close to that. So anything that kind of is a sort of a flat detail of the film, if that makes sense, could be helpful.
Right.
And I think we see it here in the end, where he kind of, I think like the person leaves or something like that. And you can almost see it. I just forget if he's sitting there and then another train shows up. No, he just kind of runs. So, but it's somewhat blocky, you can kind of make out in the background that the train has a little bit of a geometric feel to it, slightly subtle curves probably, but But what could be some ways that we can track it back and get a little bit of an interesting range? And I think we'll get some nice results from that. Okay.
Okay.
So sometimes it might require us to go back to the film a couple of times. But those are some ideas, right? Color says a lot, right? What are the colors that represent meaning? So I'll give you some references here on the meaning of color. I'll put it in the chat as well. But color has meaning, what do we want the colors to say? A light blue could mean like content, control, rescue, purpose, self-sufficient, determination, whether as a navy blue could be communication, confidence, control, success, calm, right? So the colors do have some meaning to it. And so what do we want to say in the colors as well through the storyline? Okay, does that kind of make sense?
Yeah.
So these are some great ways to kind of communicate that. Think about color. Think about the elements, the background first, and then think about color after that to kind of add to the story and tell the story that much more. Okay.
Okay.
And then we kind of go from there. Did this kind of help a little bit in terms of the information?
Yeah, I didn't really have an idea of what to do for the train. And I wasn't sure whether to make it more like detailed or more like connected to the story or not. So
okay, so yeah, you can totally make it a little bit more connected to the story, a little bit more detailed. Even if it's like the outline looking a little more boxy or not, that's okay too,
Okay.
So see, it's a nice balance of like how much is enough to kind of recognize it from the movie. And kind of go from there, okay? So hopefully that helps.
It does, thank you.
Awesome. Okay, very cool. And remember, the title, we want to see it nice and significant on the graphic there. Okay.
All right.
Awesome. Thanks, guys. Appreciate it. Okay, James. Let's go with you too. We'll take a look at your design, and then I think Sylvia, you're good, and Laker, I know you're still working, so you guys are okay for the most part, right?
All good.
Yeah.
Okay.
I finished and I edited already.
Okay. So I will email you then, Laker, if that's okay. And I'll send you some commentary, and then we'll look at it for Tuesday one more time. Okay.
I'll see you on Tuesday.
Yes, we'll see you on Tuesday. All right.
Oh, you're still recording the project. I forgot to mention that.
Oh yeah, no worries. Let's talk about your design there, James, and we'll get you going, and we'll stop the recording right now.